My name's Ryan. I'm 41 now. I met Julia when I was 24 and she was 22. We were introduced at a friend's engagement party, one of those casual summer gatherings in a backyard with string lights, folding chairs, and paper plates. I was standing near the cooler, making small talk with a few people from college, when she walked over in this simple blue sundress, holding a bottle of lemonade and grinning like she already knew half the crowd. She had this energy about her, confident, warm, quick to laugh. She made people comfortable instantly, including me. We ended up talking most of the night. Not about anything heavy, just music, favorite road trips, terrible jobs we'd both had. She told me she worked in education, helping high school students figure out their next steps. I told her I was working my way up in operations at a regional shipping company. The conversation just flowed. I walked her to her car that night. She told me I was easy to talk to. I asked if I could call her. She said, "You better." We started dating right after that. At first, it was all the usual things: movies, late-night takeout, drives to nowhere. But with Julia, things always felt a little more vivid. She had this way of turning ordinary days into something fun. She loved to plan, to organize, to make little rituals out of life. I didn't realize how much I needed someone like that until I met her. She pulled me out of my head, made the world feel lighter. Within a year, we moved in together, a small one-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood just outside Columbus. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. We decorated with second-hand furniture, printed photos from our first trip to the coast, and painted the walls a soft, almost too bright yellow that she insisted would wake the place up. I worked long hours, and she sometimes brought paperwork home, but we always made time for each other. Dinner together, Sunday grocery runs, board games, walking the neighborhood just to talk. We got married 2 years later. Small ceremony, courthouse vows, a dinner afterward with close friends and family. It was simple, thoughtful, and exactly what we wanted. I still remember the way she looked at me when we signed the marriage license. This grin like she couldn't believe we were actually doing it. That moment still plays in my head sometimes, like it's frozen there. The first few years of our marriage were all about building a life from the ground up: jobs, savings, a home. She worked hard. I did too. But we always kept time for each other. We weren't the kind of couple that needed grand gestures. It was the little things: morning coffee, watching shows in bed, texting each other dumb jokes throughout the day. It wasn't exciting to anyone else, maybe, but it was good. It was ours. We didn't have everything figured out, but I remember feeling like we were doing something real. We had momentum. We had each other. And at the time, that was enough. If someone had asked me during those first few years of marriage what our life looked like, I would have said it was full, not in a loud, dramatic way, but in a steady, satisfying way. Julia and I weren't flashy people. We didn't need constant excitement. We liked the routine, the stability, the sense that each year we were building something stronger than the one before. After we got married, we moved into a small but comfortable house on a quiet street, the kind of place where the neighbors waved from their porches and kids rode bikes until the streetlights came on. It had 3 bedrooms, a modest backyard, and just enough space to feel like we were truly settling down. Julia had a knack for turning even the most ordinary rooms into something warm. She painted, rearranged furniture, brought in little thrift store finds that gave everything a personal touch. I handled the practical side: yard work, home repairs, budgeting. We made a good team. Julia stayed in education. She loved working with students, helping them figure out where they were headed. She'd come home with stories, some funny, some heavy, and I'd listen while she vented or laughed or asked what I'd do in her shoes. I liked that she brought her world home to me. It felt like she wanted me to be part of all of it. Work for me picked up pace. I moved into a supervisory role in logistics and started managing a team. It was challenging, sometimes exhausting, but it gave me a sense of purpose. I wasn't trying to climb some corporate ladder. I just wanted to provide a stable life for the family I knew we'd eventually have. Julia was always encouraging, always quick to remind me that I was doing more than enough. 2 years into our marriage, we found out we were expecting. I'll never forget how she told me. She put the test in a gift box and handed it to me like it was a new watch or something. When I opened it, I just stared at it for a second. Then I looked up and she was already crying. Not the scared kind, just overwhelmed. Happy. I pulled her in and held her for what felt like forever. The pregnancy was smooth, all things considered. Julia was amazing through it: organized, calm, somehow still handling her job without missing a beat. I went into full prep mode, setting up the nursery, reading baby books, installing car seats like a man on a mission. When our son was born, it felt like the world stopped. He was perfect. We named him Ethan. Everything shifted after that, in a good way. We were tired, sure, but we were doing it together. Late-night feedings, nap schedules, pediatrician visits, it was messy and new and exhausting, but it was ours. We learned how to be parents side by side, without letting go of the parts of ourselves that made us, us. Even when we were stretched thin, we still made space for each other. Julia would leave notes in my lunch. I'd surprise her with her favorite snacks after long workdays. We didn't say, "I love you," out of habit. We meant it every time. Or at least, that's what I believed then. And honestly, that belief carried me for years. We were a family now, not just a couple. A real, growing, imperfect but happy family. And in those early years, that felt like everything I'd ever wanted. Time has a strange way of moving when your life feels full. Not fast exactly, but steady. Predictable. Like a rhythm you settle into without noticing, until one day you look around and realize years have gone by, and you've built something that actually feels like home. That's what the next chapter of our life felt like. Ethan was about 3 when we found out Julia was pregnant again. This time, it wasn't planned. Not that we weren't happy, just surprised. We talked about having another someday, but we weren't rushing it. Still, once it sank in, we both leaned into the moment. Julia was calmer this time around, and I was less anxious, more confident. We'd done it once. We knew the drill. Or so we thought. Our daughter, Lily, came into the world screaming her lungs out. Fiery from day one. She had her mother's eyes, sharp, expressive, always watching, and her lungs too. Sleep was a battle for months, but somehow we found a way to survive it together. We traded shifts, passed her back and forth like a delicate puzzle neither of us wanted to drop. Ethan adjusted slowly. He was curious, then possessive, then proud. One night, he asked if she'd get bigger and watch cartoons with him. We laughed about that for weeks. We settled into a new routine. Busier, messier, louder. But good. I mean it, good. Julia went part-time at work for a while, just until Lily started preschool. I picked up more hours, but I didn't mind. There was something deeply satisfying about working hard and coming home to this little storm of chaos and love. Our days were full. School drop-offs, daycare pickups, grocery lists, homework sheets. Julia was still the planner. She had this big wall calendar in the kitchen, color-coded and always up to date. She made sure birthdays were remembered, doctors were scheduled, holidays were planned down to the hour. I always said she ran our home like a mission control center. I just tried not to mess up the system. Evenings were usually the only quiet part of the day. Once the kids were in bed, we'd clean up, sit on the couch with a glass of wine or tea, and decompress. We'd talk about the kids, about work, about nothing at all. Sometimes we watched old shows. Sometimes we sat in silence. I never minded the quiet. With Julia, even silence felt connected. We weren't perfect. There were arguments about money, about who forgot to take the trash out, about whether we should finally repaint the kitchen. But none of it ever felt like more than it was. We fought. We cooled off. We came back to each other. Always. Looking back now, it's easy to overanalyze those years, to wonder if there were signs I missed. But at the time, I was content. I thought she was too. We had 2 kids, a decent house, jobs that paid the bills, and a relationship that, from my side, still felt like a partnership. We were over 10 years in at that point, and I still looked at her sometimes, sitting at the kitchen table with her glasses on, flipping through a book or helping Ethan with homework, and thought, I did something right. I found the right person, and I believed it. Every word of it. By the time Lily turned 4, things in our life felt like they were finally smoothing out. The kids were in school, Julia was back to working full-time, and I had settled into a more flexible role at work that let me be home more in the evenings. We were in a groove again, different from the early years, but good. Comfortable. Predictable in the best way. So when Julia came to me one evening and said, I think I'm pregnant, it caught me off guard. We hadn't talked seriously about having a 3rd child. It wasn't off the table, just not on the agenda. We were in our rhythm. 2 kids felt manageable, balanced. But I didn't hesitate. I smiled, took her hand, and said, okay, we can do this again. She seemed nervous at first, not scared, exactly, just cautious. She kept saying things like, it's probably nothing, or let's wait for the doctor to confirm. But when the test came back positive, she shifted into that familiar, practical mode of hers, scheduling appointments, mapping out maternity leave, reorganizing the kids' bedrooms in her head before we'd even told them. When we shared the news with Ethan and Lily, they reacted like kids do, confused at first, then wildly excited. Lily declared she wanted a baby sister to play dolls with. Ethan asked if the baby would get his own room or have to earn it. Pregnancy this time around was a little harder on Julia. She was more tired, more quiet. I chalked it up to age. We weren't in our 20s anymore, and the fact that life was just busier now. Still, she powered through it like she always did. Kept working, kept managing the house, kept the whole machine running while carrying another life inside her. I did what I could, took over dinners, drove the kids around, made sure she was resting when she could. When our third child, Noah, was born, I cried again, just like I had the first time. He came early, but strong. A head full of dark hair and lungs that filled the delivery room. Julia held him with this calm intensity, smiling down at him like she already knew him. The kids were older now, so bringing a newborn into the house was a very different experience. Ethan tried to act like he wasn't interested, but I caught him checking on the baby at night. Lily, of course, was glued to Noah from day one. She wanted to feed him, rock him, even change his diapers, which, after one attempt, she decided was too gross. Julia seemed happy, tired, yes, but happy. She took to Noah like she had with the others, and I watched her with that same awe I always had. She was a good mom. I never questioned that. But I'd be lying if I said things didn't start to feel a little off. It was small at first. Moments. A late-night text she brushed off. A sudden appointment she hadn't mentioned earlier. A strange tension in the air when I walked into her room, gone as soon as I noticed it. I told myself it was postpartum hormones. Stress. Sleep deprivation. I told myself not to read into things. But that's how it starts, isn't it? Not with a bang, but with a whisper. At first, I kept telling myself it was just the adjustment. 3 kids was no small thing, especially with a newborn in the mix. Julia was stretched thin. I was running on fumes half the time, and the house felt like it never really slept. We both said, more than once, that the early baby days were beautiful and brutal in equal measure. But even in that chaos, something started gnawing at me. Quietly, subtly, in the edges of things. Julia had always been organized, almost to a fault. She liked having a plan, sticking to schedules, keeping everything visible, from calendars to grocery lists to the kids' permission slips taped to the fridge. But now she seemed scattered. Not in the forgetful newborn parent way. It was different. She stopped telling me about things ahead of time. She'd mention a work lunch an hour before she left, or forget to let me know Ethan needed to be picked up from soccer, or come home an hour late with no explanation and act like nothing happened. I didn't want to become suspicious. That's not who I am. I've always believed that trust either exists or it doesn't, and if you have to go looking for it, it's already broken. But I started seeing patterns, or maybe I just started paying more attention. There was one evening, a Tuesday, I think, when she came home after being out for what she said was a staff development meeting. She looked different. Hair freshly brushed, makeup still neat. She smelled like the perfume I'd only seen her wear on date nights. I didn't say anything. Just asked, how'd the meeting go? She blinked for half a second, just long enough to notice, and said, oh, it was fine. Boring. I nodded, smiled, helped her put the groceries away. But the feeling stuck. Then there were the photos. We always had pictures of the kids on our phones. That was normal. But I started noticing that she had fewer and fewer of the kind of photos we used to share. Family selfies, snapshots of the kids piled on me during movie night. In their place were generic shots. Food. Coffee cups. A lot of them taken in the same spots. Same angle. Same time of day. But never anyone else in frame. Once, when I reached for her phone to check the time, she pulled it away instinctively. Not angry, just fast. Reflexive. I laughed it off, said, what, you hiding state secrets? She smiled, too wide, and said, don't snoop, old man. It was a joke, but something about it didn't feel like one. I still loved her. That never changed. I kissed her goodnight every night, brought her tea when she was tired, stayed up rocking Noah so she could rest. I told myself we were just off balance, that she was overwhelmed, that maybe I wasn't doing enough. I didn't want to accuse her of something that might only exist in my head. I didn't want to damage something I still believed could be righted. But the silences were getting heavier. The smiles were getting shorter. And the version of Julia I had always known was beginning to feel edited. like I was seeing only the parts she still wanted me to see. By the time Noah turned 1, I felt like a guest in my own house. Nothing had blown up. There was no dramatic fight, no confrontation, no screaming match that split everything open. But that's what made it harder. In a way, it was the absence of clarity that kept me up at night. Just a steady trickle of doubt, pooling quietly in the back of my mind. I still woke up beside Julia every morning. We still made coffee, shuffled through the rush of getting kids dressed and bags packed and lunches thrown together. We still sent each other texts throughout the day, reminders, grocery lists, the occasional love you, but even those had changed. Shorter, drier, more practical than warm. It was the kind of shift you don't notice all at once. Just a slow fade, until one day you realize the messages feel like something you'd send a coworker. She was busy. That was the word she used most. Busy, tired, stretched thin. And of course she was. I didn't question that. 3 kids, a full-time job, a house to run. I was busy too. But somehow, we weren't busy together anymore. We were parallel, moving in separate orbits, passing each other on staircases, trading off parenting duties with the efficiency of coworkers handing over a shift. The little touches were gone. The eye contact, the shared jokes, the pauses between conversations where connection used to live. I started keeping mental notes. I didn't want to, but I couldn't help it. The odd times she left the house without telling me where she was going. The way she started locking her phone, even around the kids. The night she'd step outside, just to get some air, and stay out there for 20 minutes scrolling. I'd watch her through the kitchen window, lit by the glow of her screen, face unreadable. I asked once, gently, if everything was okay. We were folding laundry, some sitcom humming in the background, and I said, "You seem a little far away lately. Are we okay?" She paused, barely, and then said, "Of course we are. Don't be weird." No anger, just deflection. I laughed it off. So did she. But I felt her pull a little further away after that. Some nights, I'd lie awake listening to her breathe beside me, wondering who she talked to when I wasn't around. Wondering what version of herself she gave to other people that she no longer gave to me. I didn't want to think that way. I hated myself for it. But the thoughts came anyway. I started looking at our kids differently too. Not with doubt, never that. But with a weight I couldn't name. There was something I was carrying now, some shadow between me and the life we built. I didn't know what it was, but it followed me everywhere, in the school drop-offs, the dinner table conversations, the quiet routines that used to feel so full. And Julia, she just kept going. Smiling when she needed to. Joking when she wanted to. And always making sure I didn't look too closely. It wasn't proof. It wasn't evidence. But it was enough to keep me up at night. And it was enough to make me wonder if I still knew the woman I'd promised my life to. There's a line people cross in their minds before they ever cross it in the real world. A place where they sit with a thought long enough that it begins to change shape, not just a suspicion anymore, but a question they can't unask. That's where I was living. I didn't want to take a DNA test. I didn't want to question the children I had raised, loved, held through sickness and sleep and scraped knees. I didn't want to invite that kind of darkness into my life. But I couldn't keep living in the blur anymore. The space between not knowing and not asking had become unbearable. It wasn't just the way Julia had changed. It wasn't just the text messages I wasn't allowed to see, the appointments that didn't add up, or the silence between us that had stretched so thin it barely held. It was the way I felt when I looked at my kids and didn't know whether I was grieving a truth I hadn't even discovered yet. Ethan was 13 now. Lily was 10. Noah had just turned 3. They were mine in every way that counted, in the way they looked at me when they were scared, in the way they called out for me in the middle of the night, in the way they trusted me to be there. But something inside me had snapped. Not out of anger, but exhaustion. I couldn't live another year, another week, feeling like a stranger in my own life. I didn't tell Julia. I didn't talk to anyone. I ordered the kits online, 3 of them. I followed the instructions quietly, methodically. It felt clinical, surreal. Swabs, codes, packaging. I labeled everything carefully, sealed the boxes, and dropped them off one morning on the way to work without saying a word. My hands shook the whole way there. And then I waited. The thing about waiting for something you both need and fear is that it turns time into a strange, slow ache. Every moment stretches. Every glance becomes loaded. I watched my kids with more tenderness than I could admit. Every laugh, every question, every tired lean into my side felt like a test of who I was and what I was about to lose. I didn't know what I wanted the answer to be. I just knew I needed to stop guessing. Julia didn't seem to notice. Or if she did, she didn't say anything. She kept up the routine, her perfect choreography of everyday life. Work, dinner, bedtime. Smile, brush, kiss. She moved through the house like nothing had changed, while I felt like I was carrying a weight she didn't even want to acknowledge. And maybe that's what hurt the most, that she either didn't see me unraveling or didn't care to ask why. I told myself I would accept whatever the results said, that I'd still love my kids, no matter what, that none of this was about them. It wasn't. It never would be. They were innocent. They still are. But if there was a truth hiding in the foundation of my life, I couldn't keep walking across it, hoping it wouldn't crack beneath me. And so I waited. For numbers. For clarity. For a quiet confirmation of a truth I had already started to feel deep in my bones. I got the results on a Thursday morning. I was at work when the email came in, subject line simple, polite. Your DNA test results are ready. For a second, I just stared at it. My hand hovered over the mouse, and I felt this strange moment of stillness, like the room around me had gone quiet. I already knew. I think I'd known for weeks, maybe longer. But knowing something and seeing it in black and white are two very different things. I clicked. 3 reports. 1 for each child. I opened Ethan's first. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I skimmed past the explanation and the disclaimers and went straight to the section I was dreading. Probability of paternity, 0%. 0. Not a question. Not a maybe. Just the most definite answer a lab could give. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. It didn't feel real yet. It felt like reading about someone else's life. I opened Lily's report next. Same result. 0%. By the time I opened Noah's, my hands were shaking. It was like watching a slow-motion accident you couldn't stop. And there it was again. The final nail. 0%. None of them. Not one. I didn't cry. Not then. I didn't flip my desk or scream or throw anything. I just sat there in that small office, the cursor blinking at the bottom of the page, and I felt everything inside me go quiet. It wasn't rage. Not yet. It was loss. Something deeper. Something that didn't have words. Because it wasn't just that Julia had lied. It was that she'd done it this completely, this thoroughly, this effortlessly. 15 years of marriage. 3 children. 1,000 little moments that I thought belonged to us. And now I had to rewrite all of them in my head, wondering who else was in the picture the whole time. I didn't go home right away. I sat in my car for nearly an hour. I scrolled through photos on my phone, birthdays, vacations, messy kitchen dinners, Christmas mornings, and saw faces I loved more than anything. Kids who looked to me like I was their whole world. And for a moment, I hated myself for even doing the test. But the thing is, I needed to know. I needed the truth, even if it broke me. When I finally did walk through the front door, Julia was in the kitchen like always, barefoot, phone in one hand, stirring something in a pot with the other. She looked up, smiled, and said, "Hey, you're home early." I stared at her for a long time. I said, "Yeah." I didn't say anything else. Because what do you say to someone who spent your entire marriage building a life with you, while hiding that the family you thought you had wasn't really yours? I went upstairs, closed the door, and for the first time in our house, I felt like a ghost, like someone who didn't belong anymore. I didn't say anything to Julia the night I got the results. I couldn't. Not because I was unsure, and not because I didn't want to, but because the words wouldn't have done the damage justice. Nothing I said could match the weight of what she'd already done or undo what those documents confirmed. I needed time to think, to feel something other than numb. So I said nothing. I went to bed next to her like everything was fine, and in the dark, I stared at the ceiling with a hollow chest and a mind that wouldn't stop spinning. The next morning, I called in sick. I waited until she left for work. I watched her pull out of the driveway in the car I bought, the life we built, still wearing the lie like a second skin. Then I packed. Not everything, just what I needed. Clothes, papers, my laptop, a few photos that I couldn't bear to leave behind. I left her things untouched. I didn't want a single piece of her to come with me. Then I opened a drawer, pulled out the DNA test results, and printed all 3. I laid them out on the dining room table, Ethan, Lily, Noah, side by side. No headlines. Just cold, clinical numbers. The truth, stripped of emotion. Next to them, I placed a short note. I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. It simply said, "You lied for 15 years. I know. All of it. You will never see me again." And just beneath it, I added, Enjoy the car. I'm taking the other one. That was the only touch of anger I allowed myself. Before I left, I did one more thing, a choice I wrestled with, and I'm not proud of it. I reached out to Julia's sister, Emily. We'd always had an odd chemistry, never acted on, never spoken aloud, but there. Years of looks across dinner tables, fleeting moments at family events where something unspoken passed between us. She was the only person I felt would understand what I'd lost, what had been taken from me. I didn't go to her for revenge. Not exactly. I went because I needed someone to look me in the eye and not lie. And when she answered the door, saw my face, and asked, she did it, didn't she? I broke down. I didn't expect to, but I did. We slept together that night. I didn't film it. I didn't make some grand gesture out of it. I didn't do it for Julia to see. But the next morning, I left without looking back. No apologies. No promises. Just the knowledge that, for one night, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't a placeholder in someone else's lie. I returned to the house once more, the day after, when I knew no one would be home. I dropped off the envelope with the DNA results and the note, grabbed my remaining things, and left my keys on the counter. I took both cars, mine and Julia's. I'd paid for them both. I didn't feel the slightest guilt. That night, the text started. The calls. Long voicemails I never listened to. They came in waves, confusion, begging, fury, silence, then back again. I blocked her number, then her email, then her social accounts. I didn't care what she had to say. Nothing she could offer would make me want to hear her voice again. She built a lie and called it a marriage. I just finally walked out of it. After I left, everything was quiet. Not peaceful, not at first, but empty in a way I wasn't used to. For the first time in 15 years, no one was texting me about groceries. No one was waiting at home. No one was calling to ask where I was. And as strange as it sounds, that silence hurt more than the betrayal. Because I didn't just lose Julia. I lost the rhythm of my life. I lost the shape of what my days used to be. I lost the belief that I belonged in the life I helped build. And I didn't have the kids to distract me from it. They weren't biologically mine, and though I still loved them, I couldn't pretend nothing had changed. I didn't want them caught in the crossfire. I didn't want to make promises I wasn't sure I could keep. So I stayed away. I found a short-term rental about an hour outside the city, one of those furnished ghost houses behind someone's property, quiet and tucked away. I took long walks. I worked. I slept like someone trying to forget he existed. Some nights, I'd stare at the ceiling for hours, not thinking anything specific, just trying to understand what part of me was real and what part had been built around a lie. The world didn't look the same, and I didn't feel like the same man. I went back to therapy, this time not to fix the marriage, but to find myself. To figure out who I was outside of being a provider, a husband, a father to children I didn't help create. The therapist asked questions I hadn't let myself consider. Had I ignored my own needs for too long? Had I trusted too blindly? Was I grieving the people or the life I thought I had? The answers didn't come easily. But sitting in that room, week after week, I felt something shift. Not healing. Not yet. But presence. I was showing up. For myself. It took months before I let anyone in again. I kept to myself. I worked. I read. I spent entire weekends without speaking out loud. And slowly, I started to notice what didn't hurt anymore. I could drive past schools without thinking about Ethan's drop-offs. I could look at a family in a restaurant without that sharp pang in my chest. The grief didn't go away, but it settled. It became part of me, something folded in, like scar tissue that no longer bleeds when touched. And then came Claire. We met through mutual friends, a dinner I almost skipped, a seat beside her that I didn't ask for. She was quiet but direct. She asked me what I liked doing, not what I did for work. She asked how I felt about solitude, not how long I'd been divorced. We didn't talk about pain right away, but I think we both sensed it in the other. That soft, careful way people move when they've been broken before. We started slow. Coffee. Walks. Long, meandering conversations that didn't try to go anywhere. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't some sweeping romantic escape. But it was honest. And after everything I'd been through, that mattered more than anything. I didn't tell her everything right away. But when I finally did, she didn't flinch. She didn't pity me. She just nodded and said, "That's a hell of a thing to carry. I'm glad you're still here." So am I. It's been over a year now. Long enough that the sharp edges of everything have dulled, but not so long that I've forgotten how it felt. I remember it all, the moment I opened the DNA test results, the way the house looked when I left for the last time, the silence that followed me for months afterward. Some days, it feels like someone else lived that life. Other days, it feels like it just happened yesterday. But here's the truth. I'm still standing. I didn't think I would be, not at first. The kind of betrayal I lived through doesn't just take your marriage. It takes your identity. It makes you question your memory, your judgment, your worth. It shakes everything you thought was solid and leaves you trying to rebuild with bare hands. I wasn't just mourning Julia. I was mourning the version of myself that believed I was living an honest life. And yet, through all of it, I didn't lose myself. I found myself. Slowly. Quietly. Without needing to scream or prove anything to anyone. I never spoke to Julia again. After I left the test results and my note on the table, I never looked back. She tried. The messages poured in at first, confusion, denial, then desperation, then silence. I blocked it all. Not because I hated her. I didn't. Not even after everything. I just refused to let her narrative shape my healing. She had 15 years to be honest. I had no obligation to hear what her honesty sounded like after she'd lost control of the story. I haven't seen the kids. Not once since I left. That choice, not theirs, not really, is the only part that still aches. I raised them. I loved them. And in many ways, I still do. But I also knew that staying in their lives under the weight of that lie would have done more harm than good. Maybe, someday, they'll find me. Maybe they'll want answers. If they do, I'll be ready to give them nothing but the truth. Gently, but fully. As for me, I'm not the man I used to be. I don't rush anymore. I don't chase approval. I don't bend myself to fit someone else's comfort. I live in a smaller house now, with fewer things, but more space to breathe. My life isn't packed with distractions or noise. It's quieter, clearer, better. Claire is still here, still kind, still honest. We don't talk about the past much, unless I bring it up. She never pries. She just listens. And every time she does, I feel a little more whole. I'm not trying to write some neat ending to a messy story. There's no perfect resolution here. Just a man who loved hard, trusted deeply, broke quietly, and then kept going. So if you're reading this and you've been lied to, left behind, or blindsided by someone you trusted, just know that you don't have to stay broken. You don't have to forgive what was done to you if it means forgetting who you are. You just have to choose yourself. That's what I did. And it was enough.